Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor. Coming up at 8:07, I'm going to leave the warmth of the studio, go out on the street on Wisconsin Avenue near Friendship Heights Metro Station with my friend Trevor Maddich. There'll be two huge guys on the street. We're going to talk to you about the upcoming battle against Seattle. What do you think? And then at 8:37, we'll be joined by your friend and ours, Brett Baer from the Fox News Channel. Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor.
And on New Year's Eve, instead of watching the ball drop, we were watching Joe Biden meander around the Capitol Rotunda trying to get a fiscal cliff deal done. And John Funn joins us now from National Review and National Review Online to give us his insight into the week that was in American politics. And boy, what a week it was. John, Happy New Year. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
So the fiscal cliff deal is... Well, it's not done, but they figured out the taxing part of it, it seems, and put off the rest of it. But I read your column over on The Corner at nationalreview.com that it's amazing how much pork somehow found its way into this simple little law that they passed on New Year's.
Well, we have a government that promises transparency, an administration that says, we should know what we're voting on. And what did Congress do, both the Republican House and the Democratic Senate? I mean, the fiscal cliff bill arrives, and in the House, I think they had 13 minutes to read it. In the Senate, a couple hours. This is not the way to run a railroad or a government. This is preposterous.
And kudos to you, John Funn, because
got into the bill.
John, you were with us, I think, 6 weeks ago, and you said they should open this up. The Republicans, John Boehner, should say right now we're going to open this up. We're going to bring the C-SPAN cameras in. Let's do the whole thing out in the open. You called it way early on, and boy, were you right about that.
Well, John Boehner, at least belatedly, has announced, or at least communicated to his aides, he is never again going to sit down one-on-one with President Obama behind closed doors because he just doesn't believe the president negotiates in good faith. The president's negotiating strategy is what's mine is mine and what's yours is negotiable.
Yeah. And that new shift from John Boehner, was that a result of the disastrous deal that they ended up getting, or was it a result of the pressure from the conservatives that we saw this week, sort of pushing back and even threatening to stand in the way of his reelection as Speaker?
Well, I think that certainly did play a role, but I disagree with a lot of people. I don't think the deal was disastrous at all, because think about this. 84% of the tax cuts became permanent. I was astonished the Democrats gave on that. Progressives are livid that Vice President Biden basically took the negotiating ball away from Harry Reid, who was trying to hold firm, and they ended up with a 2-month sequester, which means that the spending cuts are going to be debated at the same time the debt limit is coming up for renewal. Naturally, the Republicans are going to pass a bill in the House saying for every dollar we increase the debt limit, we need a spending cut dollar. And that's going to be a tough bit of leverage for the president to exercise, because I think he gave away a lot of his negotiating leverage.
All right, so let's talk about what happened yesterday with Boehner being reelected Speaker. Now, there was a lot of talk and a lot of rumbling and a lot of mumbling about the fact that he might not be able to get reelected as Speaker, but in the end it was. But it does, even though he's got some serious problems within his Republican conference.
Right. By the way, we can't forget that 5 Democrats also voted against Nancy Pelosi for minority leader. So there's some dissension in both parties. Well, look, Boehner got a lot of people angry at him. I mean, he muffed Plan B, the vote, just before Christmas. That was a real sign of weakness on the part of the Speaker. I think a lot of Boehner's problems stemmed from the discipline that he tried to exert against 4 Republicans who had opposed him. And I think what really bothered the Republican conference was you only seem to punish conservatives who are trying to stand up for spending cuts and real reform. You never punish Republican liberals who vote with the unions or the National Education Association, which give 95% of their campaign money to Democrats. So I think that's what hurt Boehner. But in the end, there were a lot of members who were just sitting back in the cloakroom waiting to see if Boehner was going to fall a couple of votes short. Then they'd come out and vote against him. But it turned out that his whip operation was good. He 3 votes to spare. in Washington terms, that's a landslide.
But I got to ask you though, when all was said and done, and we had Boehner as Speaker, Nancy Pelosi as the minority leader, and then we saw how the other leadership positions filled out, I was reminded of that line from the Who song. It's that "Meet the new boss, same as the old boss." And it seems to me that many Americans were really sort of hoping that things would change, but it's exactly what we had in the 112th House of Representatives.
Yeah, and the Senate leadership hasn't turned over much either. Look, the last Congress was basically a stalemate. You had a Democratic Senate that refused to pass a budget for 3 years. You had a Republican House that passed, 30 job creation bills, and they went over to the Senate and just died. Nothing happened. It was the least productive Congress in recent memory, and President Obama didn't help out. So now President Obama won re-election, 51% of the vote. We're going to go to Groundhog Day. If you like gridlock, wait till you see Gridlock Day, which is what we're going to see over and over again for the next 2 years until the next midterm election.
That's what the American people voted for. John Fund is our guest. You can find his stuff at nationalreview.com, and specifically right now his latest post at the corner is about wind energy tax credits, which somehow found its way into this thing on New Year's Eve. Lots of green energy stuff in there. Talk to me specifically about the wind energy tax credit and who benefits from this.
Well, a lot of utilities that have conventional and nuclear power plants, and they use the wind energy to reduce their tax liability overall. Next Era Energy out of Florida, it's I think the sixth largest utility in America. They paid a few years ago almost no tax at all because of these wind tax credits. Look, wind is fine as a hobby energy program, but you can't store it. It's unreliable. It's incredibly expensive. And, of course, it's going to be part of the mix, but it's not our real energy future. Our real energy future is going to be in natural gas, in smaller scale, safer nuclear power plants, a whole bunch of things. And we should have new energy research and development and all kinds of alternative energy. But Lisa Jackson, who's the departing Secretary of EPA, she basically just wants to declare war on all conventional energy methods. And by the way, I'm convinced she was leaving in part because of this email scandal where it turned out she was running the entire agency under an alias named Richard Windsor. She created a separate email account for Richard Windsor.
That got very little attention, didn't it?
Well, I think it's going to get more attention because on January 14th, the first of 3,000 emails from Richard Windsor are going to be released by the Justice Department, and the Congress is on the case, and there's an Inspector General investigation underway.
How about
All
that?
right, John. Listen, by the way, really quickly, how is it to be here in January and not have any professional football teams from New York in the playoffs? That's got to be hurting.
I've always said, as a person who only lives in New York but is not from New York, I think New York teams are just full of arrogance, and I love to see them humbled and occasionally out of the playing field because they deserve some humility, which they seldom get.
A little Washington-New York rivalry is always good. So you're all in for the Redskins then?
I'm a West Coast team guy. I'm Switzerland in this battle.
Thank you, John Fund from National Review Online for